Good afternoon. I'm calling the Board of Directors meeting to order and this is a specific agenda, as all of you are aware, and it is Wednesday, June 8th at exactly 1 p.m. So let's go to agenda item 4, discussion of the options to HART's current full funding grant agreement. And before we begin with Brennan, Dan, would you like to put this into context? Because what the public may not be aware of, and I hope all board members do have copies of this, is that on June 6th, you received a letter from the United States Department of Transportation, the Federal Transit Administration, regarding a recovery plan. So if you would like to give this as the backdrop as to why we are going with this presentation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Hanabusa, members of the board and the public. We did receive, as expected, a letter from the Federal Transit Administration this week that requires us to put together what's called a recovery plan. As a result of the recent risk refresh of our budget and schedule that the FTA conducted, it was determined that the funds we have available to complete the project are insufficient, and that the time to complete the project is likely longer than had been previously anticipated. As a result of that, there is a mechanism that the FTA can engage in, which is called a recovery plan for various entities that are in a similar situation. And in the most basic terms, what the recovery plan does is to identify any shortfall in the budget and then ask the individual recipient, in this case the City and County of Honolulu, of federal grants, to come up with scenarios that will be discussed with the Federal Transit Administration to either shorten or limit the actual full funding grant project as it was described in that document. What Brennan Morioka, Sam Carnaggio, our project director, and a number of the staff have been working on is an initial take on what various scenarios might look like. They've also included scenarios that have been proposed by various individuals that HART should look at in terms of what the project might look like if we were to build to the budget. And then at the very beginning, Brennan, I think, will outline for everybody sort of how we got here and what the gap is. And we've been calling it internally sort of, Plan A and Plan B, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Plan A is to identify what the shortfall is and to have a public discussion about whether or not additional revenues can be found to make up that gap. The second half and the bulk of the presentation really focuses on if we were to build only with the available funds we have today, what might those scenarios look like. And so this is intended to be informational and exchange of ideas. And in the letter that we received from the FTA, they've requested that over the next couple of months that we produce a report to them or a recovery plan that would be what we would propose. I might parenthetically say that I think that's a little bit short in terms of the time frame we need. I've already reached out to Leslie Rogers, the Region 9 administrator, because I think we may need a little more time just given the constraints that we have to deal with all of our various partners. But that being said, the goal is to come to some consensus, go to the Federal Transit Administration, and seek from them their guidance and cooperation to, if we need to size the project to meet our current projected budget.
I know that Member Louis Kwan has a specific question to you, but just so that the public is aware that the letter sets a deadline of on or before August 7th.
That's correct. As
the time to come up with the recovery plan. And Member Louis Kwan is going to just follow up on that shortly.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan, we've been told consistently by the FTA that the project, as determined to be 20 miles, 21 stations, was non-modifiable.
That's correct.
Under the full funding grant agreement. Does this request by the FDA indicate that they're willing to deviate from that plan that's been laid out in the full funding grant agreement?
It does. What has been communicated to us is that I think there's been a recognition that we had identified a shortfall previously, and that the city and county made an attempt to try to make up that shortfall in good faith and came up with a 5-year extension of the general excise tax. However, because of the continued escalating costs here on the island, I think they recognize that that is likely now, the costs have outstripped even that additional 5-year extension. And so for the first time in my time with the project, I would tell you that the FTA has had a complete turnabout and have said to us that they are looking to work with us to size the project to the available budget with the goals that were still embedded in the FFGA, meaning we had a projected ridership of now about 119,000 riders. We wanted to have certain positive transit benefits that would be purchased by the $1.55 billion from the federal government and the local money. And what the challenge we have now is, and basically what they've said to us is this: how close can you get to that original commitment with the money you have? And if we can come close enough, then they've indicated to us that not only would they be amenable to changing the full funding grant agreement to amend it, but that they would also leave the full $1.55 billion commitment on the table to us. Because I know another question that had been asked in the past is, if we didn't build everything, might they take all or some of the money back? And the second important point that they've made is that the resources that they've pledged, if they approve this revised project, would be fully pledged to the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just so that we all understand, when the executive director spoke of the FTA raising this in the past, it was actually in August of 2014 that the FTA actually raised it in an August refresh, budget refresh, I believe. And at that time, they had said that this project may be in a recovery mode as well. But because of the GET extension, that was deferred, and now we are here, because I was the one who was before City Council on June 1st, and we're going to have to explain why our figures are this far off now. And just so that we have background on this, all of you received this just in the last meeting. This is effective March 16th, and it has the FFGA, and then it has the October 15th, and then it has March 16th. So Brennan, let's get this thing straight. The 7.967 is with a 15% contingency, and we don't know whether that's a P50 or P65, but we do know one thing. That is that the FTA doesn't like our contingency numbers, correct? They've always felt that our contingency numbers were too low. Because when we went before City Council, our contingency number was only $130 million. That's correct, right? When we asked City Council to give us a 2.1, what would be their 2.1?
The 130 was just the allocation of that they had to reallocate from the prior year. But it was the full amount that would have been necessary in the drawdown that we had approved by FTA.
So the problem as I see it is this. So the 6.827 figure that FTA is working off of, when they got to and said that our estimates were too low, they worked off of our figures, HART's figures of 6.827. Isn't that correct?
They worked off of our original estimates that were not, because we're doing our own separate independent cost estimate via our CE&I contract for the East.
I'm talking about what they worked off of in March. They worked off of our figures that resulted in the May 10th.
It was a previous cost estimate that we provided them, which was much lower than it is today.
So just to give, because Colbert is new, let's look at these figures. Airport Guideway, which is what we're talking about, starts in the FFGA, just so we all are on the same page, of $511,822,000 and some odd. Then in October, it goes to 673,440. And then in March, now October to March, October, November, December, January, February. 5 months later, we're at $820 million. Okay, this is just for airport. City Center, which is the other one, we're at 528,299 with the FFGA. Then in October, we're at $702 million and 720,000. Then in March, 5 months later, we're at $866 million. And I personally think those numbers are too low. Having said that, now we're going to go back and we're going to have to explain to council that we're at $7,967,000. Okay? And then we were just using these numbers, Brennan, June 1st. And now we're going to come back and we're going to say we have $7 billion, almost $8 billion. And we didn't make that disclosure to council. So what could have possibly have happened in that period of time when we're before city council telling them, this is what we need. We can do airport and we can do city center for this amount of money. Just give us flexibility so that we can actually use some of the contingency money to issue that quote, the bid, or award the bid so that Dan doesn't get in trouble. So Dan doesn't have to go to jail is really what we were trying to say, because he can't issue the contract. So to Colbert's question, right? And you went through this whole litany. We don't have the money. We do not have the money as projected to issue city center. Would that be a correct statement?
Not as currently planned, correct.
Right, not as currently planned.
Correct.
So whatever bid is out there, we can't, Dan doesn't have the money. He doesn't have the money to be able to say, okay, we can issue those contracts. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes.
Because if it wasn't a correct statement, we just wasted a whole lot of people's time watching to say, hey, we're at $8 billion ourselves, guys. Right? The only reason we're going through this is because the FDA and the PMOC has told us, you guys are off. You don't have enough money. So that's why we're going to negotiate that. Wouldn't it be a correct statement?
Yes.
So we are clear as to why we're doing this. I don't want people to leave here with the impression that, oh no, we went through all of this, but we still have enough money to do this project. We don't have the money, or you guys should tell the board that we should tell the FDA and the PMOC, we have enough money. But we both know we don't have enough money. Is that correct?
Correct. So that slide was our attempt to demonstrate that there is a $1.1 billion shortfall,
Right.
compared to project cost versus projected revenues.
And I want to be clear on that, because I don't want people to think, and especially the council and the mayor and the legislature, to think that there we go again, we just don't answer it straight. We don't have adequate funds. So yes, for people who want us to build it the way it's got to be built, then they have to find us right now, as we sit here today, an additional potentially $1.2 billion, even by our own estimates, correct?
Correct.
So, and just so that we're clear, though we use a GET, and this is Corey's Kuliana, we use a GET rate of increase of 4.3, even if we were to go to the 5.04, which we didn't use because the GET revenue increase was coming in lower, I think the delta is only possibly in a wonderful world situation, we get more GET, maybe about $200 million. Would that
correct.
be a correct assessment?
That's correct.
So just so that everybody knows what the money picture looks like. So what we didn't put up there, because we said that alternatives are we build to budget, or we budget to build. The budget to build would mean simply, where are you going to get an additional $1.2 billion? The mayor and the council chair has said there is no way we're going to increase real property tax. And though we may want to try, my friends at the legislature, and they've told me clearly, don't come back, but we can try to do that. But you're going to need another GET extension in order to possibly cover that amount of money. Isn't that correct? Wouldn't you agree that?
Yes.
If we don't have real property tax, you'd have to get a GET extension. I don't think you can do a GET extension. So, given that situation, we are here because we have to find out what is the best alternative. But also, so the public knows, it's not clear that this board is going to be the decision maker either. Because the FFGA is entered into between the city and county on Honolulu and HART as its agent. That's how the FFGA is written. I do not believe that it would be just our executive director who would go there. Because remember, members of the board, we have a problem because we have a governance structure issue as to who makes the decision for HART. But having said that, it's not necessarily HART that's going to make that decision. That's why we're looking on your last slide to some sort of task force or group. The problem is that August 7th deadline. We have to come up with something by August 7th. So unfortunately, we're not going to have all the good information that we should have in order to make this decision. Wouldn't that also be a correct statement?
More than likely, yes.
So we will have the opportunity to have input. And the reason why we're having this hearing is to tell the public, this is where we're at. We don't know, and we could possibly make a recommendation, whatever that recommendation may be, the best we can say given the information we have, but that may not carry the day either, because what that would probably be is a situation where we're going to have to decide who is going to be the decision maker and who's actually going to negotiate with the FDA. Whether the city then says, HART, meaning Dan, you will be our agent again, or whether the city says, no, we're going to do it in some form or another. So have you heard from the FDA in any way that who they anticipate negotiating with on this?
No, we have not formally, but typically they have indicated that their normal protocol is to deal with the agency itself as the representative of the, I guess, the
Recipient,
grantee,
yeah.
the recipient.
And the grantee is the city and county of Honolulu.
Correct.
So the city and county of Honolulu could also just simply decide whoever the city and county of Honolulu is, whether council defines itself as the city and county of Honolulu as the policymaker, or the mayor, or a combination of both, they could decide to make that decision. So members, I just wanted to clarify where we were, how we're here, and really what it looks like. So we felt that it was necessary for everyone to be aware of the situation that we were in, because FDA was in, they're here now, not if PMOC is here now, so we needed to bring it forward, and also for the public, because something like this will get out and people will know that we've got this problem. The other issue that we have is the fact that literally on June 1st, we went before City Council, and in the next meeting, we're going to talk about the budget, what the role of HART is on the budget, what do we do, what can we do, but the HART board anyway. But the other issue was, we also know that from the experience on June 1, we've got a major credibility issue with City Council as well, because they feel that we, because they're looking at these numbers too. So they continue to tell me when I go before them, how could you tell us? Because remember now, this is just beginning of June, and it was in January that we were there with Bill 23 to basically say extend the GET. So they said, HART came in, told us 1.2 billion and not a penny more. So we have 300 and something million that we could put in a planning bucket, which they did. And now you're telling us you don't know how much it's going to be, and that was, March or so. And now when they hear this, it's going to be even more. They're going to say, well, how can you come and testify before us that we need a $2.1 billion additional CIP budget? And what happened? Why now? We don't even know that you can build everything that you asked us to authorize you to build. So I think the most important thing for us as a board and for primarily the public is to share the information as we received it. So this was actually in reaction to the fact that I think it was the Star Advertiser, as I see Marcel back there, who broke that the PMOC and the FDA, when they were here, said that it was going to have their estimates were 900 million to 1.2 billion more. So this all started in reaction to that. Let's look at the figure. If it gets to that point, we just don't have the GET income. What are we going to do? And then we also knew that the FDA had, in a conversation, I believe, with the mayor and council chair, said that come up with some proposal. The first sign of it in writing, I believe, was this letter. Isn't it true, Dan? This is the first sign of it in a letter, actually written about the recovery plan?
It is.
Yeah, but before that, they had mentioned it. So in anticipation of the fact that we would be put in this situation, meaning City and County of Honolulu, HART, we said, okay, let's look at what does it mean to be in a recovery plan, and well, how would we comply with cutting the project or cutting the costs? And that's, so whether we play as a board, I'm sure, I'd like to think that people would welcome our opinion, but I don't necessarily know that. So just getting ahead of myself here, one of the issues is whether members of the HART board can even participate in a task force because of sunshine. So we have those issues as well. So do we have to form a pig among ourselves in order to participate? I mean, there's all these different types of issues that we have to contend with. So we're not quite sure how active a role we can play, but the one role we can play is we can bring it to the public so that they can get a sense as to where this project is. And that we have to earn that credibility, trust back, so to speak, because in the process, we've lost it, and because people, if you're looking at these figures, right, how can you go from in March and to now, and because April, May, 2 months. I mean, how do you explain the change in that short period of time, and how do you explain or answer that question? What happened in between? Right? What happened between March and of this year, not even last year, March of this year to now, that even you, HART, is saying that you're about 1.2 billion short of where you were in March, and that is the answer that we have to give. And we can attribute some to contingency. We can do all of that, but like Mike said, if contingency is only 760 million, which is a lot more than what we're carrying before, it still doesn't explain the rest. But we are in a position where we have to say, okay, now how do we move forward? So one thing is possibly the situation that we need to move forward on, and we don't have the ability to vote. We have the ability to continue this, but we would have to. Of course, a GET extension would do it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think real property tax is going to happen either. So outside of that, the only other pile of money that might be available is if the legislature breaks loose some of that surcharge on the GET. So just to give the board an idea, and maybe we can get closer to wherever. And like I said, and just so the members of the public know, I'm not saying that this board is going to make the decision, because I don't believe that this board will be making the decision, but I'm hopeful that they'll ask at least some input, and I believe the staff will definitely have some input on this, so maybe that's something that you can add in and see what the FTA does. They could say that's another GET kind of thing, and we're not gonna roll the dice with you guys on it.